Hello, everyone. I want to welcome everyone here to the inaugural Silent Push Community Corner. My name is Jonathan Peister. I'm a product manager here at Silent Push. And we're really excited to give you some updates on our product introduced in version 4.4 at the end of last month, where we've really brought everything we know about domains and IPs together in what we're calling our total view. To go through all this with you, let me introduce my colleague and our head of product, Colm Diver. Before I pass it over to Colm, I just want to note that you're welcome to ask questions using the Q&A box below, and we'll be making sure we have time to answer them by the end of this little webinar. So take it away, Colm. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hey, guys. First of all, I'd like to apologize. I have a bit of a head cold, so if I don't sound too clear, I apologize for that. Okay, so this session is going to be a quick run-through of our new total view, as Jonathan mentioned. And we're just going to simply run through the concepts behind it and what we thought from a product perspective of why we put it together and the thought process behind the various parts of it. And then we'll run through a few examples to show you how you can leverage this view to detect threats. Okay, we have here what we call a new total view. This previously was our enrichment page. Previously, we used to have to bring different parts of the system together in terms of the data you see here would have previously involved 11 different sections of the app. So you would have had to navigate to all these different left-hand menu sections to find this data. So the real driver behind this piece of work was the fact that we wanted to bring this information all together in a central location to simplify the task of the threat analyst. So the idea was to bring this contextual data into a centralized location, to visualize it where possible, and to make it as intuitive as possible. So the idea was that at a glance, you could very quickly detect whether this is an indicator worth investigation. So if you look at here, for a start, we have our highlight section, and it's quite a visual highlight section. We have up in the top here, our scoring, and then we have the tabs at the bottom here. So if we look at this, first of all, we previously had a number of different scores on the page that were quite difficult to make sense of. With quite a lot of different risk scores attached to it. So we've tried to simplify that process down. So we now have one score indication in the top left-hand corner, and we make it very clear in terms of whether that's a high-risk indicator or low risk. So you can immediately see from this whether this is a high-risk indicator. We'll also have these flags that will tell you some more contextual information around the indicator. And you have this ability to share this if you want with anyone. So you can take a screenshot of this essentially and share it with your colleagues or share it on social media. So if we take the highlight section itself, one of the thoughts we had is how can we visualize the risk scores around this without bombarding you with too many numbers? So we're trying to think of some concept to come up with a shape that you can very quickly visualize and get a grasp of what the risk associated with this indicator is. And this is this diagram here that we came up with. And so the idea here being that, based on the various different risks associated with this indicator, we create this shape. And the idea is that over time, you will become very familiar with this shape. So you can almost at a single glance look at this and have quite a good grasp on where the risk associated with this lies. So this is the left-hand scoring diagram, and that's kind of key to what we do to give you that kind of quick at-a-glance view on this. For the rest of the page here, we brought in all of the PA-DNS infrastructure. So we had this previously, but now we've taken it in here and we've kind of gathered it all together in kind of at the top of the page in the enrichment section. And you have the ability anywhere here to click on this, and this will actually open up the related section down below. So for example, if I was to click on the SOA records, it's going to bring me down and open up the sub tab below, and I can very quickly view those records. Okay, and you will notice that throughout this highlight section, in that we try to gather all the information here, make sense of it, but also allow you to then drill down into the various parts so you can actually get the more detailed view on that. So it's a high-level view, and then you drill down into the detailed view. So this is our DNS kind of record section, and you can very quickly see from here what records are associated with this indicator. The second part here is this what we call the infrastructure variance, and this is key to what we do at Silent Push. So when we collect our raw data, we build this layer of attributes on top of this raw data, and this layer of attributes will, in this case, will show you the movement of this infrastructure over time. And these become searchable attributes. and it's key to what we do. So for example, we can see in terms of an indicator moving through IP space over time, moving across various different ASNs, having numerous NS changes. These are all indicators of behavior of threat actors. And because we record these, you can very quickly see, you can follow this, you can search on this, and you can see these kind of TTPs of fast flux, etc. So again, you have this ability here to view it here, and you have the ability to drill down and to view the actual details on that. So I can see the movement through IP space here and across different ASNs. Okay, so again, we give you the high level detail, and then you can drill down into to get the actual detail associated with that. And we also brought in some of our WHOIS information. Now, again, there's quite a lot of WHOIS information out there, so we tried to pick out the key pieces of information that we thought would be most valuable for threat analysts to see. And we think the two key things are the registrar and the created date. Obviously, the address has lost a bit of its value with GDPR, etc. But these are two key pieces of information that, again, we tried to bring in. So you can very quickly see when was this domain registered and where was it registered. The third concept we have here is a live scan of the domain. And again, this is kind of quite key to what we're trying to do. So we're saying we're trying to show you the underlying infrastructure of what's associated with this indicator, but also show you side by side what's actually there at the moment. So again, at a glance, you can see what is on this site right now, along with what is the underlying infrastructure right now. And we try to lay this out somewhat like you would see it on a browser, and we obviously blow it up a bit. So in this case, it doesn't have a favicon, but if it had a favicon, you would have that highlighted here. You see the HTML title beside that, and below it, you have the actual screenshot of the site itself. And then beside that, we'll give you the actual response in terms of, it's a 200 response, so potentially it gets rejected, when it was scanned, and the header server that it's on at the moment. What's key here as well is that sometimes we won't be able to live scan. The site is no longer live. So what we do in that case is we fall back to our most recent scan. So we will look back in our scan database and we'll say, show me the latest scan for this site. And you will see that by the scan date. You'll see that the scan date is previous. It could be several weeks ago, 7 months ago, etc. And then if that fails, we'll indicate that there was no live scan available. So we have three scenarios. We have the live scan, we have our historical database, and then it's not possible to have a live scan. The fourth concept here is what we call our live threat feeds. So again, we wanted our customers to be able to see at a glance if this indicator is on one of our live threat feeds. So is it known bad that we know about? So we show those details down here. Again, if it's on multiple feeds, you're able to click through those and actually see what they are. In this case here, we'll also show you the tags associated with that. And if you are an enterprise customer, you can actually click on those tags and it will actually take you directly into those related infrastructure for that, or indicators associated with that tag. Okay, we will also show you any indicator tags, and those are tags that are associated with this particular indicator. So we have our feed tags, which are associated with all the feeds. So the feed itself will have its own tags, quite often telling you about the campaign. The indicator itself can have its own unique tags. And then we have the user tags, and those are private tags to you. So you might decide that you have your own little tagging system that you want to tag indicators, and you can filter on those as well. Okay, so that's our highlight section here. And again, this is the concept here to give you at a glance view on what we know about this indicator. So what we load up as well with this is we load up the PADNS records associated with that. So you will see in here now, these are all the details around the DNS records associated with it. And again, within here, you can pivot through that. We show you when they were first seen, last seen, the ASN, IP, all the details you would need to get a concept on this. Likewise with Quad A, likewise with name servers, and all of the DNS types. For the infrastructure variants, like we shown earlier, you can see the movement over time. So again, this can be really powerful in terms of seeing, when did they move across, and quite often useful in terms of detecting an attack. So you'll see the kind of pre-attack, move to Cloudflare to hide, and then move on. So it's quite a useful view to have. We also will give you the list of the ASNs. You can drill in there and enrich those and actually view details on this ASN as well. Also in here, we will actually tell you the domains hosted in that ASN associated with this domain. So again, you can drill in here and say, for this domain, show me the associated subdomains or domain that were on this here ASN. And then name servers will show you the details of the name service and our risk score details around that. Okay. We then have our web scanner view. So this is going to show you all of the web scans we have available for this domain. And we actually give you the actual, we have our own bespoke query language that we use for this, and we actually expose that. So we will actually show you the actual query that we use here, and you're free to edit that. So you can actually click here to edit that, opens in a new window, and then you can modify that as you wish. So if you wanted to modify that, check other things, you're free to do that. Again, in here, you're free to enrich these. So if you find anything else in here of interest, you can click on it. You can add it to the query and filter it down within this subset of information, but you can also then enrich it. So you can jump through this. So again, you can pivot off in whatever direction you believe is most interesting on this here. We show you our WHOIS data. So if there's any changes in the WHOIS, you can drill down and see what those changes are. And we give you a comparison from the previous view, so you can view that. We will tell you details of the threat feed. Now, obviously, I'm actually in the community edition here at the moment, so that you guys can see the exact same view that you see. So our threat feeds are locked down to our enterprise customers. So our enterprise customers will actually get details on the threat feed, including how we compile that feed. So we have TLP Amber reports, which actually will tell you how we created that feed and the queries that we use to track down these threat actors. We then have the screenshots, a history of screenshots, and I will show you an example in a minute of how you can look back on those, and they can be quite useful as well. We have our context similarity search, and this is a really interesting one in that it's quite a conceptual thing that we're trying to do here that we think could potentially be really powerful. So this is when we look at a vector database of all the known bad indicators in our database, and we compare this indicator to those to see what it is most like. So the idea being that sometimes when you run into a bit of a dead end and you're not sure where the connection is here, you can look across all of our known bad, and this will give you an indication, and it is just an indicator, but it will give you an indication of what it is most like and a potential pivot point for you to take. So it's a really kind of novel thing that we're doing, and we think it's potentially very powerful. We also have our dangling DNS section. So this will tell you if there are any dangling DNS records associated with this. And we have blogs separately on the website that you're free to look over, or please ask any questions around that, and we'll explain the concept of dangling DNS. But from a an hygiene perspective, it's quite critical in terms of if you're looking at even at your own infrastructure. Do you have any sites out there that are dangling and potentially could be taken over? And we actually track that. Subdomains, we will look at all the subdomains with this. And you will notice here as well, in this case, we've detected a wildcard subdomain record. And this is key, and I will give you an example in a second on this, but we have one here as well. This can be quite important because when you look at your DNS records and what IPs they're hosted on, you think you can track it, and that looks quite good. But quite often, threat actors will use a wildcard record, which means regardless of what domain you're putting in here or subdomain you're putting in, it's going to get resolved to a different IP address. That may not be obvious or apparent to you, but we give you that visibility, so you can actually drill into it and see what those IPs are and the time frame that they were active. And I'll give you an example of this in a few minutes. And then you have the certificates. So again, we look at the certificates across this infrastructure, and we'll actually track that as well. We'll also look over them and tell you if any of them are due to expire in the next 24 hours or in the next 30 days. And we also give you a breakdown in terms of who the issuer was. And again, this can be quite key of looking at your own infrastructure, and that sometimes you might see some outliers here and you'll wonder, why is this, Let's Encrypt being used to issue certificates for our organization? And again, we'll give you that visibility on this. Okay, you can expand the highlights at any time here. And again, for the enterprise edition, you have the ability to save this to feeds and collection and have this tracked. I will just mention quickly here, we do this for IPs as well. So again, there's a slight difference in how the IPs look, obviously because of the data involved. So there are less DNS records, but we will show you the A records associated, what's hosted on those. And again, you can drill through those. And again, you can pivot to those, so you can enrich those and you can drill down those as well. We'll show you the pointer records, we'll show you the IP infrastructure, threat feeds, web scanners, screenshots, etc. So you have the same concept, slightly different data involved. And you'll see here, for example, we'll have in the ASN, because it's a single ASN associated with an IP address, we actually give you the full enrichment here. So you can come in here and see the full enrichment details for the ASN that it's on. And likewise on the subnet, you can look, and if it had a poor reputation, we'll give you details around the subnet it is on as well, because we assign a score to that as well. Okay, so that's the IP and the domain total view that we have at the moment. So if we look at some examples of this here, we'll take this site here, for example. And this is one I just looked at earlier today, and I pulled up. So this is one, and again, we look at this here and we scan it, and we can see if we look at the scan that it's obviously targeting Spotify. I can see that from the screenshot here. But what's quite interesting here is that you can see the title is quite strange. You kind of go, what is this, the point of this? So we can come into our web scanner and we look at this, and it's quite unusual because we can see here that it's, in most cases, actually, if we take, this is our scan, but if we look at our DNS records, we can see it's on this IP address. So when we look at web scanner, we see that IP address, but we also see this, which is quite unusual. So this is kind of an indicator that at sometimes they actually use this redirect service. So that would indicate to us that this is something that gets turned on and off. So at some point in time, they'll actually redirect you. And you can see this actually gets redirected to Spotify. So it gets redirected to a genuine site. And at other times, you actually pass through to the actual target site. What's also useful here is that we can look at the subdomain. So again, we get a sense from looking at the subdomains here. And we can see clearly that, again, Spotify has been targeted. They actually have it in the subdomain name. And again, we can drill down into that, click on it to get a sense of what's been hosted on that subdomain. And again, if we look in here, we can see it's on this same IP, obviously, it's on the answer, but we can also see here from a screenshot that it's clearly targeting Spotify. So we can see the login screen on this. So again, the idea being that you can drill down into these things, you can pivot into them, you can get a sense by looking at the various aspects on one screen in terms of what's happening here. Okay, let me take another example here. Looking at our web scan data. So we look at this domain here. You can see from the name, it looks like it's targeting Barclays. Again, we look in the web scan data. And if I scroll back in time and look at our historical scan data on this, I can see back in April of this year, it's the default page. And I can tell this is set up in hosting here. So it's using a default page set up here. Okay. A few days later, it's you can see here, coming soon, start Bootstrap theme. So it's obviously use an off-the-shelf framework to set up some kind of website. It's still on Let's Encrypt. And then nothing happens for quite some time. And then you see come July, now we see some movement here. The title changes to the live data. We can see them playing about with different certificates here. And then on the same day, we can see that it actually moved to set up the Barclays favicon, and the title gets changed to target that. What's interesting here as well, if you notice that the actual domain is redirecting to another similarly named domain, but actually different. There's a hyphen here, if you can see. So they've actually redirected to this site, which is the impersonation. But at a later stage, it actually redirects this. It stays on the same site. So they obviously have multiple sites targeting this domain. What's also interesting here is that we can look at this data and collate that back with our view of the underlying infrastructure. So if I come back in and look at the actual DNS records here, I can see again in April, it's on AS Hostinger, which was the original hosting site. And then in July, the 6th of July, they move it to Cloudflare. So obviously with the intention of trying to hide behind that traffic, and you can see that movement. And it does jump around. Sometimes you can see it move back here again. And if we look at the web scanner history here, you can see that at some point, it's no longer active. So it goes back to FastPanel, which is an off the shelf again, back to just the default page. And then it's come offline completely here. Now, what we can do here as well, so we have the underlying infrastructure view, we have the web scan view, and we can also come in and look at the screenshots for this. So again, if I look in here, you can see I can load back in time as well to look whenever we have screenshots. And I can see here that it was targeting Barclays at this point. So you can see that the actual screenshots there was targeting Barclays. And then it moves to being taken offline. And then the most recent one here, I can see that it's an Google error, so it's not resolving correctly at all. Okay, so again, the idea here being that you can move across all the different angles that we have in this data to get a concept of what's happening. Okay, another example here is when we mentioned about the certificates that we'll show you that due to expire. So again, you can see in this case here, we have one of the certificates is due to expire in 30 days. So again, we highlight the fact it was 30 days, and then if it was less than 24 hours, we highlight it in red, so it's really clear to the user. And then finally, I'm mentioning here about the wildcard subdomain records, which is quite interesting. So if you look at the room connect here done online, I can see it has a wildcard record. So if I click on that, that's going to take me in here, and I can see it resolves to these IP addresses that are on this host one's ASM in this duration. So I can see from this period here, it's on this, and then it moves to this, then it moves to this. But what's really interesting here, if I come back to the actual DNS records associated with Room Connect itself, you can see that this is a completely different view. So if you were to look solely at the DNS and the IP records associated with this domain, you would think these all look fine, these are all green, this is all good. And it's only by looking at the wildcard records that I can see that there's actually something else going on. And because this is a wildcard record at that apex domain level, it means that any subdomain during this period will get redirected to these IPs. So again, it's that idea of getting a full view across everything that we offer with Total View. So again, the concept being that we try to kind of summarize the data here during the highlights section, make it really clear and quickly kind of grasp even from this diagram of what you're looking at. And then you can drill down into the actual really detailed information that gives you the full kind of view across everything that we have. And you can pivot into those to actually, determine what is actually happening. So I hope this makes sense. I hope that is easy enough to follow. If you have any questions on this, we'd love to hear from you, but I'll hand back to you guys on that.
Thank you so much, Colm, for taking us through that. Wanted to open it up for any questions. I have a couple. I think one is, can you explain the difference between what we mean by web scanner and our live scan in the product?
Yeah, absolutely. So the live scan is a tool we use to do an actual scan right now on a site. And we have an advanced version of that as well, where you can actually define what browser you want to use, what operating system, whether it's a mobile device, etc. But it's a live scan on it. The web scanner is a tool that we use to search through all of our historical data that we have in that. So we've been gathering a lot of data in terms of our web data. We have an extensive database of all of that data. And the web scanner is almost a way to chop and dice that data any way you want and to filter down on it to find exactly what you want. And it's a really powerful tool in terms of you can pivot off. If you find one little indicator of something that's been set up wrong, the header server being used, for example, you can combine these values to detect everything else that's set up the same way. So it's a really powerful tool, we think, in terms of trying to find information.
For sure, definitely a favorite of mine. Another question we get a lot that comes up in the context of our scan data is around query language. Can you speak a little bit to the query language that we're leveraging?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's sometimes we're always a bit cautious about talking about yet another query language, because I'm sure every organization out there has loads of query languages. The concept we had behind this is that we wanted to come up with a standardized way to find this information that would also allow us to build a very standardized UI and UX experience for our users. So again, everything that drives us is how can we get this information into our users' hand as easily as possible. So the reason that we drove towards this is that we have obviously huge data sets behind this that are hugely complex, and we needed some kind of standardized interface to interact with all of those data sets. The tools that were out there weren't satisfactory in terms of being able to give us that power. So we had to come up with our own language that allowed us to create a standardized interface into all of these data sets, and that allowed from a user perspective to be oblivious to all of that complexity behind the scenes. And that's the driving force behind our own kind of query language.
For sure, Colm. Totally second to having used a lot of other scanning data tools. Of course, query languages are powerful, and ours is very powerful too. But a core focus for us was an alternative, offering the ability to develop these queries using more of a building block visual interface. So we want to offer both options, regardless of which you prefer.
Exactly. And that we try to cater to both markets in terms of if you're a very technical, advanced analyst, you have that ability to go and knock yourself out with the scripts. But if you're not, then we also give you the kind of more simpler user interface where you can still create the same access, the same power without having to be an expert in writing up any kind of queries.
Really appreciate everyone joining. This, as I mentioned, is the first of many community corners to come. We really want to, as we introduce more and more features into our platform, introduce them to the cybersecurity community and get your feedback to really fuel the rapid development that we've been focused on. So thank you so much for joining today. Any questions come up after the chat, don't hesitate to reach us. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.